My wife slept with my brother while I was caring for our grandfather. They walked into court smirking. But what I revealed left her speechless. I used to believe that we had the perfect life. My name is Daniel. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Logan Square, Chicago, in a charming brownstone that Claire and I spent the first 2 years of our marriage fixing up together. Claire, my wife, is an interior designer, the kind of woman who could make anything feel like home with just a few flicks of her wrist and a handful of thrift store finds. We had our Sunday yoga classes, the book club she joined for the wine and witty banter more than the reading. We had 2 designer cats, Oscar and Wild, that Claire insisted on adopting because, as she put it, every sophisticated couple in the city has to have a pair of these. Sometimes, I caught her curling up on the couch, scrolling through fancy design blogs on her phone with a faint, contented smile. And for a while, I believed that was all we needed. We met back in college, both studying at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. She was majoring in interior design, while I was buried in architectural drafting, long hours hunched over plans and sketches, and endless nights fueled by coffee and late-night pizza. She was the life of every room she walked into, always surrounded by friends, always making people laugh. Me? I was quieter, the kid from a working-class family who felt a little out of place among all the rich kids with trust funds. But Claire never made me feel like I didn't belong. She'd lean over and tug at my sleeve during lectures, whispering jokes that only I could hear. She'd roll her eyes at the snobs in her department who thought they were better than everyone else. That was what I loved most about her. She was fearless and free, never afraid to stand up for what she believed in. After college, we rented a little one-bedroom apartment with drafty windows and a creaky floor. Claire turned it into a haven, mismatched throw pillows, an old record player she scored at a flea market, shelves lined with plants she never remembered to water. I didn't care. I loved the chaos of it, the feeling that every inch of that space was somehow hers. It was easy to ignore the small cracks that started to show, like the way Claire would pick up hobbies and drop them just as quickly. One week she was obsessed with making sourdough bread. The next she was buying expensive art supplies that ended up gathering dust in the closet. She'd plant herb gardens in every sunny window, but they'd always end up wilted and brown. "Don't worry, I'll take care of them," she'd say, waving me off with that bright, confident smile. But she never did. I'd water them when she wasn't looking, just to keep them alive a little longer. I thought it was just her creative spirit, a sign that she was always searching for something new. I told myself it didn't matter if she never finished what she started. But a part of me wondered if maybe she was chasing something she could never catch. When we finally bought the brownstone, it felt like we'd made it. Our friends came over for dinner parties where we served up charcuterie boards and fancy cocktails. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, the ones who had it all figured out. And in those moments, I almost believed them. But even then, there were signs I couldn't ignore. Claire started working late more often, her project consults running well into the night. She'd come home smelling like expensive perfume and wine, laughing about the people she'd met at some exclusive event. I'd be sitting on the couch with Oscar and Wild in my lap, pretending I wasn't worried. One night, I tried to talk to her about it. "You're always so busy," I said. "I feel like I barely see you anymore." She laughed, brushing it off like it was nothing. "Daniel, you worry too much. You know how this industry is, networking is everything." I nodded, even though it didn't feel like everything. Even though the little voice in my head was starting to ask questions I didn't want to answer. In the mornings, she'd kiss me on the cheek before heading out, her phone already buzzing with messages. "Love you," she'd say, but it always sounded like a reflex, not a promise. And I'd stand there in the kitchen, the herb garden dying on the windowsill behind me, telling myself that this was just how life was, that the woman I loved was still in there somewhere, beneath the bright lights in the half-finished projects. That one day, she'd come back to me. But I think I knew, even then. I just didn't want to believe it. It was a slow unraveling, the kind you don't notice until it's already happened. A couple of months after I first started feeling that distance between us, Claire and I stopped doing the things that used to make us feel close. No more Saturday mornings spent lazily sipping coffee together at the Cat Cafe, or late-night reruns of old sitcoms where she'd curl into my side and whisper how much she loved the corny jokes. I'd try to keep up our old routines, but she'd always seem distracted, her phone in her hand as she scrolled through photos of new design trends or messaged clients at all hours. We'd be watching a movie, and I'd glance over to see her eyes glazed, not really seeing what was on the screen. If I put my hand on her knee, she'd flinch like she'd forgotten I was even there. It wasn't that she was outright cruel. She was just absent, like there was some glass wall between us, and she'd already decided to stay on the other side. I'd ask her if she wanted to take a pottery class together, something to reconnect, something to remind us of how we used to laugh when our mugs came out misshapen and wobbly. But she'd just shrug, her eyes already flicking back to her phone. "I don't have time right now, Daniel," she'd say. "You know how it is." I tried not to let it get to me. I told myself she was just busy, that she'd come around. But every night she stayed out late at project consults, meetings she said she needed to land a big client. I felt something in me start to close up. She'd come home smelling like red wine and expensive perfume, and I'd be lying there in bed, staring at the ceiling, pretending I was asleep. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited for her to come home. The cats curled up at my feet as I practiced what I wanted to say. When she finally walked in, I took a deep breath. "Claire," I said, "I think we need to talk. This isn't working." She blinked at me, like I was speaking a foreign language. "What are you talking about? You're never here anymore," I said quietly. "I feel like I'm living with a ghost. When was the last time we even sat down together without your phone in your hand?" She scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Oh my God, Daniel, don't start with this. You're just being paranoid. Everything's fine." "It's not fine," I said, my voice shaking. "I miss you. I miss us." She rolled her eyes and dropped her purse on the table. "This is exactly what I mean. You're so insecure, always needing reassurance. It's exhausting." I felt my stomach twist. "I'm not trying to be insecure. I want to feel like we're still in this together." Claire let out a laugh that wasn't funny. "Daniel, I'm building something here. I'm meeting people who can help me get to the next level. And you're here whining about movie nights and pottery classes." "I'm not whining," I said, my voice low. "I'm telling you I feel like I'm losing you." She let out a breath, her expression softening for just a moment. "Daniel," she said, her voice almost gentle, "you're overthinking. I promise, everything's fine." But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. A week later, I brought up the idea of therapy. I thought maybe if we had someone to help us talk it out, we could fix whatever was slipping away. But when I suggested it, Claire just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "Therapy," she said, her lips curling into a smirk. "Seriously, Daniel? You think we need therapy because I'm working late? You sound like you're about to have a nervous breakdown." "I don't," I said, feeling my face flush. I don't want us to end up like." "Like what?" she snapped. "Like one of those boring couples who sit in a circle talking about their feelings all day? Jesus, Daniel, grow up." I felt the words catch in my throat. I didn't know what to say, how to make her see what was happening to us. So instead, I went alone. I found a therapist who listened patiently while I tried to explain how I felt like a ghost in my own marriage. She asked me questions that made me dig deeper than I wanted to, questions that scared me. But each session left me feeling a little less like I was going crazy, a little more like I deserved better than just waiting around for scraps of affection. Meanwhile, Claire kept up appearances on social media. She posted pictures of our cozy brownstone, of our matching coffee mugs, of herself beaming with the caption, "Building a life together, one dream at a time." I'd stare at those pictures, feeling like I was seeing a stranger's life instead of my own. She looked so radiant in those posts, like the perfect wife in the perfect home. No one would have guessed that every night, we barely spoke to each other. And I just kept going. I watered the half-dead herbs on the windowsill. I fed the cats. I went to work, came home, and watched the space between us stretch wider and wider. Sometimes, I wondered if she even noticed. Sometimes, I wondered if she even cared. It was a Tuesday night, and I was cleaning up the kitchen when I found it. A crumpled receipt tucked behind the fruit bowl. It wasn't just any receipt. It was for a rooftop bar in River North, the kind of place you only went if you wanted to impress someone. The name of the bar didn't ring any bells, but the date did. Claire had told me she was at a late-night client meeting in Oak Park that night, miles away from this glittering downtown lounge. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe a friend had picked it up, or she'd stopped by for a quick drink after work. But I couldn't shake the way she'd brushed off my questions that night, or the way she'd come home smelling like a perfume I didn't recognize. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. I stuffed the receipt in my back pocket and went about my night like everything was normal. But later, lying awake in bed, the doubts were too loud to ignore. I watched her sleeping beside me, her face calm and peaceful, and I wondered who she'd really been with that night. The next day, I dug deeper. I opened the tracking app we'd installed on our phones years ago just in case. She'd laughed back then, saying it was a sign of how connected we were. Now, it felt like a window I shouldn't be peeking through, but I couldn't help myself. I tapped through the locations from the night. She said she was working late. My heart sank as the little blue dot moved from one trendy spot to another. A craft cocktail lounge, a fancy boutique hotel, a hidden park she'd never mentioned to me. All of them nowhere near the place she'd claimed to be. The next morning, I confronted her in the kitchen. Claire, I said, my voice barely steady. Why were you at the Skylight Lounge last week? She looked up from her coffee, blinking like she hadn't heard me right. What? What are you talking about? I took out the receipt, laying it on the table between us. This, I said. You told me you were at a meeting in Oak Park, but this says you were at the Skylight Lounge. She laughed, but it was brittle and forced. Daniel, that's not what it looks like. You're really going to read into a stupid receipt? God, you're so controlling. I flinched. I'm not controlling. I'm just trying to understand. Why would you lie about where you were? Jesus, Daniel, she snapped, her eyes hard. This is why I don't tell you things. You blow everything out of proportion. I felt something crack inside me. Claire, I'm not blowing anything out of proportion. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, because it doesn't make sense. She rolled her eyes and pushed her chair back. I'm done with this conversation, she said coldly, grabbing her purse and walking out the door. After she left, I sat there staring at the receipt for a long time. My hands were shaking. I didn't want to be the kind of man who snooped around his wife's life, but I couldn't ignore what was right in front of me. A few days later, I found something else, an old phone in the back of her closet, buried in a pair of running shoes she never wore. It was a cheap burner phone, the kind you bought if you didn't want anyone to know what you were doing. My stomach twisted as I turned it over in my hands. It was locked, of course, but the fact that it existed at all felt like a punch to the gut. When she came home that night, I tried to confront her again. Claire, whose phone is this? I asked, holding it up. She froze, her eyes narrowing. Why are you going through my things, Daniel? Are you trying to control me again? Control you? I said, my voice cracking. You've been lying to me, Claire. I'm not crazy. I know something's going on. She snatched the phone from my hand, her face going red. You're insane, she hissed. You're obsessed with trying to catch me in some lie. I can't even breathe around you anymore. I stood there, stunned, as she stormed upstairs and slammed the door behind her. I wanted to follow, to yell back that I wasn't obsessed. I was scared, but the words stuck in my throat. Later that night, I heard her phone buzz in the living room. A message preview flashed across the screen. Last night was unreal. Miss you. Concept brief. My heart stopped. The contact name was like a slap in the face, a sign that whatever she was doing, it was more than just drinks after work. I took a screenshot before the message disappeared, the proof I needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. When she finally came back down, I didn't say anything. I didn't trust my voice. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, looking calm and unbothered. I watched her, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. I realized then that it wasn't just about another man or late-night drinks. It was about the way she looked at me, like I was the problem, like I was the one who needed fixing. She twisted the truth so well that for a moment, even I wondered if maybe she was right. But deep down, I knew. I knew the woman I fell in love with wasn't the same person sitting across from me. And I knew that no matter how much she tried to gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid, the truth was right there in that message. I just didn't want to believe it. I told myself I'd figure it out later. For now, I just needed to keep breathing, one shallow breath at a time. It was almost 2 in the morning when I heard the knock on my door. At first, I thought I was dreaming, that dull, persistent thump echoing through the quiet of my apartment. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and padded barefoot down the hallway, my mind racing with half-formed thoughts. When I opened the door, there she was, Madison, Claire's best friend since high school, standing there with tears streaking down her cheeks and a half-empty bottle of red wine clutched in her hand. Daniel, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Can I come in? I nodded, stepping back to let her inside. She smelled like cheap Merlot and expensive perfume, the same scent Claire used to wear when we first met. Madison looked like she hadn't slept in days, her eyeliner smudged, her hair in a messy knot at the back of her head. She sat down on the couch without waiting for me to offer, clutching the bottle against her chest like a lifeline. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I should have told you sooner. I sank into the chair across from her, my heart hammering in my chest. Told me what? Madison? She took a shaky breath, her eyes darting around the room like she was afraid of being overheard. About Claire, she said. About everything. I didn't say anything. I just waited, my hands clenched tight in my lap. Madison had always been the one who knew all of Claire's secrets, the one who helped her plan her elaborate schemes and cover her tracks. If anyone knew what was really going on, it was her. Madison took a long pull from the wine bottle before setting it on the coffee table with a soft clink. She's been cheating on you, Daniel, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I've known for months. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. I felt them slice through me, cutting deeper than any of Claire's lies. Who? I managed to say, though my throat felt tight. Who is it? Madison shook her head, her eyes filling with fresh tears. I can't say. But it's someone close. Someone you trust. My stomach flipped. What does that mean, Madison? Who is it? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I didn't want to get involved. I thought it would blow over, that she'd come to her senses. Blow over, I said, my voice rising. Madison, I'm your friend too. You should have told me. I know, she said quickly, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her oversized sweater. I know, and I'm sorry. But she was so convincing, Daniel. She made it sound like it wasn't real, like it was just a phase. But I've seen the way she looks at him. I've heard the things she says when she thinks no one's listening. I leaned back in the chair, my head spinning. Claire's late nights, the phone she hid, the cryptic messages, it was all real. It wasn't just in my head. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Madison reached out, her hand brushing mine. I'm telling you now because I can't stand it anymore. You deserve to know the truth, Daniel. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. Does she love him? I asked quietly. Madison hesitated, then nodded. I think she does. Or at least, she thinks she does. You know how Claire is. She's always chasing the next thrill, the next new thing. But this, it's different. A bitter laugh slipped out of me. Different, right? She squeezed my hand, her fingers cold and trembling. I'm so sorry, Daniel, she said again, her voice cracking. I should have told you sooner. We sat there in silence, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to tear down everything we'd built together. But another part of me just felt numb, like I'd already known the truth and was only waiting for someone else to confirm it. After a while, Madison pulled her hand back, her eyes red and puffy. I should go, she said, her voice small. I didn't come here to make this worse. I needed you to know. Madison, I said, my voice low. Thank you for telling me. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Daniel, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know what you're going to do now, but whatever it is, just know you're not alone. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed her. I walked her to the door, the weight of her confession pressing down on me like a stone. She turned to me then, her eyes searching mine. For a second, everything stopped, the hurt, the betrayal, the anger, and all that was left was the soft, desperate need to feel something other than pain. And in that moment, we kissed. It wasn't planned or passionate. It wasn't anything like the kisses I used to share with Claire. It was just comfort. Two people who didn't know what else to do with the hurt in their chests. When we pulled back, Madison's eyes were wide, her lips parted in surprise. I'm sorry, she whispered. Me too, I said, my voice shaking. Then she was gone, and I was alone again in the dark. The apartment felt colder than it ever had before, the silence pressing in around me. I sat down on the couch, staring at the empty spot where she'd been, and let the tears come. Because there was no more pretending, no more excuses. The truth was out, and there was no way to go back. The night before the court date was the longest night of my life. My apartment was too quiet, the walls pressing in around me like they'd been waiting for this moment all along. I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee, the steam long gone. I kept going over everything in my head. The receipts, the phone, Madison's confession. Every detail felt like a puzzle piece that finally fit. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living in that half-life, pretending not to see the cracks in the walls. Julian, my lawyer, called me around 10 to go over everything one more time. He had this calm, steady voice, like he'd seen it all before and wasn't going to let me lose my mind. Daniel, he said, we're going to keep this clean and simple. Claire's going to come in swinging. You need to be calm. Let me do the talking. Okay, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Julian paused. I know this is hard, but you've got the truth on your side. Don't forget that. I thanked him and hung up, but his words didn't comfort me. My phone lit up with a new message. It was from Madison. You'll hate me after tomorrow, it read. But remember, I tried. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what she meant by hate me. All I knew was that whatever happened tomorrow, there was no going back. Around midnight, my brother Marcus sent a text. Don't come to court. We can talk it out. Please. I almost threw my phone across the room. Marcus, who'd always had my back, who'd laughed with me over beers and sat up with me when my grandfather died, Marcus, begging me not to show up in court? My chest felt tight. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. Instead, I got up and started pacing the apartment. The cats watched me from the couch, their eyes wide and curious. I envied them, the way they didn't know about betrayal or lies, or the way everything could fall apart in a single day. I thought about the last family dinner we'd all had together, how Claire had laughed at something Marcus said, her hand resting lightly on his arm, how I brushed it off as nothing, just the easy familiarity of two people who'd known each other for years. Now I couldn't stop replaying that moment, the way they looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching. I thought about my mother too, how she'd always been quick to smile, quick to smooth things over when there was tension. I hadn't heard from her in days. I wondered if she'd even show up tomorrow, or if she'd decided it was easier to pretend this wasn't happening at all. By 2 in the morning, I was still pacing. I kept thinking about how different everything looked now. The brownstone we'd spent years fixing up together felt like a stranger's house. The cozy routines and couples' hobbies had become memories of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I thought about the way Claire had called me controlling when I confronted her, about the way she'd spun everything around, turning her lies into my paranoia. I thought about Madison's tearful confession, how she'd warned me that the fallout would be worse than I was imagining. And I thought about Marcus, my brother, my best friend, the person I'd trusted more than anyone in the world. I wondered how long he'd been a part of this, how many times he'd looked me in the eye and lied. I sat back down at the kitchen table and took a deep breath. I reminded myself that tomorrow was about more than just winning in court. It was about finally standing up for myself, about refusing to keep living in the shadows of other people's secrets. I thought about what Julian had said. You've got the truth on your side. I repeated it to myself like a prayer. When the sun finally started to rise, I took a shower and put on the suit I'd bought for the hearing. It still had the tags on it. I'd been waiting for a special occasion. Funny how life works. I looked at myself in the mirror, the man staring back at me, older and more tired than I'd ever felt. But there was something else there too, a hardness I hadn't known I had. I grabbed my folder of evidence, the GPS logs, the phone screenshots, the financial records. I held it tight against my chest, like a shield. When I left the apartment, the air was cold and sharp, the city waking up around me. I knew tomorrow would change everything, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. I took one last look back at the apartment, the life I was leaving behind, and then I walked out into the morning light, ready for whatever came next. I walked into the courthouse just before 9, the early sun glinting off the marble floors like it was trying to blind me. My lawyer, Julian, was already waiting by the security line, calm and collected in a gray suit that looked like it had been pressed that morning. I, on the other hand, felt like I hadn't slept in a year. "You ready?" he asked, his eyes steady on mine. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. Inside the courtroom, everything felt too clean, too official. The judge's bench loomed high above us, and the rows of benches were already starting to fill with people I barely recognized. Claire sat across the aisle, dressed in a sleek black dress that looked more like she was headed to a cocktail party than a courtroom. She had that same cool, polite smile she'd worn at every dinner party we'd ever hosted, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. But the thing that stopped me cold was who was sitting next to her, Marcus, my brother, his hand resting lightly on hers, like he was staking a claim. I don't remember sitting down. I just remember the way the air seemed to drain out of the room, the buzzing in my ears as everything else went blurry. Julian leaned close. "Keep your eyes on me, Daniel," he said quietly. "Let them put on their show." Claire's lawyer started first, weaving a story so neat and polished it almost made me laugh. He painted a picture of two people who'd simply grown apart, of a woman who'd been left lonely while her husband buried himself in work. He called what happened between Claire and Marcus a tragic but beautiful evolution, his words smooth as silk. I felt like I was listening to a bedtime story written just for them. Then Julian stood up, and the room shifted. His voice was low and measured, every word deliberate. "Your Honor, my client has been the target of not just an affair, but a deliberate and calculated deception. We have evidence of collusion, financial, emotional, and physical, between the petitioner and the respondent's own brother." He presented it all, the GPS logs, the receipts, the financial statements, the phone records that showed Marcus funneling money to Claire in small, careful amounts, like he thought no one would notice. And then he laid out the timeline. How Claire had been meeting Marcus while I was driving halfway across the state every weekend to care for our dying grandfather. How they'd used those hours, the hours I spent holding my grandfather's hand, telling him he wasn't alone, to celebrate their own twisted anniversaries. I sat there, my heart pounding, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard I thought the wood might crack. Claire wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the judge, her lips tight, her fingers twisting around the edge of her sleek dress. Marcus, though, he kept glancing at me, little flickers of something like shame, or maybe just fear, in his eyes. I couldn't tell which. When Julian finished, the judge looked over his glasses at the two of them, his face unreadable. "This is not just a matter of infidelity," he said slowly. This is a matter of premeditated deceit and manipulation, and it will be treated as such. Claire's lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut him off with a sharp gesture. The prenuptial agreement is clear, he said. You entered into this marriage under false pretenses, and you will abide by the consequences. He upheld the prenup in its entirety. Claire and Marcus would get nothing. No share of the house, no piece of my savings. The judge's words were like a bell tolling in the quiet room. Final, inarguable. Claire's face went white, her lips parting like she wanted to protest, but nothing came out. Marcus dropped her hand and looked down at the table, his shoulders slumping like he'd just realized how heavy the cost really was. Julian packed up the folders with the same calm, methodical precision he always had. It's done, he said quietly, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder. I nodded, though the weight of it didn't feel real yet. I looked across the aisle one last time, at the woman I'd loved, at the brother who'd been my best friend, and for a moment, I almost wanted to say something, to ask them why, to demand an explanation. But I didn't. There was nothing left to say. As I walked out of the courtroom, the cold autumn air hit me like a shock. The world felt different, somehow brighter and sharper and painfully, achingly real. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in, the wind in my hair, the sun on my face, the finality of it settling into my bones. It was over, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally start to heal. A week after court, I got the call from my mother. We're having a family dinner on Sunday, she said, her voice carefully neutral. We'd like you to come. I almost said no. I should have said no, but something in her tone, the way she sounded almost gentle, made me pause. Maybe I thought it was an olive branch, a chance to clear the air. Or maybe I just wanted to see them all one last time before I closed that chapter for good. When I got there, the house was warm and bright. My mother had set the table with her best china, the candles flickering in the soft light. It looked like something out of a magazine. Perfect, polished, and completely fake. Everyone was already there. My dad was carving a roast at the head of the table, and Marcus sat beside him, trying to look relaxed. Claire sat across from Marcus, her hair done up, her face pale but composed. She didn't meet my eyes. I took the seat at the far end of the table, the spot they always gave me when they wanted to pretend everything was fine. We started with small talk. My mother asked about work, about the cats. Marcus tried to talk about sports, like nothing had happened at all. Claire kept her head down, pushing food around her plate. It felt like I was watching a play, everyone reciting their lines, pretending the script hadn't already fallen apart. About halfway through dinner, Marcus cleared his throat. Daniel, he said, his voice low. I know things got messy, but we're still family. We can get through this. Claire looked up then, her eyes wide and glistening. Daniel, I'm sorry, she said quietly. I never meant for it to happen this way. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch, heavy and uncomfortable. My mother jumped in, her voice tight. Daniel, don't you have anything to say? I looked around the table, at Marcus, who was suddenly so earnest, at Claire, who looked like she might cry, at my parents, who sat there like nothing was wrong. And then I pulled out my phone. I thought you might say that, I said, my voice calm. So I brought something. I played the security footage. The grainy video showed Claire and Marcus together, the same night I'd been sitting by my grandfather's bedside in the hospital. They were laughing, holding hands, kissing like they didn't have a care in the world. The table went dead silent. My dad's fork clattered to his plate. My mother's face went white. You think you can spin some story about how I was distant, how you were just looking for comfort? I said, my voice low. But this was while I was burying our grandfather, while I was taking care of the family you claimed to love so much. Claire's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. Marcus's face went red, his hands curling into fists on the table. My dad cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. Daniel, you didn't have to. I cut him off. No, you don't get to tell me what I didn't have to do. You don't get to tell me anything. Not anymore. I stood up, sliding the phone back into my pocket. I'm done pretending this is okay. I'm done pretending this family is something it's not. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Daniel, please. But I shook my head. I loved you all. I did everything I could to keep this family together. And you turned around and did this. I looked at Claire one last time. She had tears on her cheeks, her mascara smudged. But I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel anything at all. I pushed my chair back and walked out, the silence behind me like a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, I felt like I was really free. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, crisp and clean. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Madison. You did what you had to do. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I knew that she understood, that maybe she was the only one who really did. I got in my car and drove home. The night sky spread out above me like a promise. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was finally starting to breathe again. I woke up the next morning to the soft, pale light of early dawn filtering through the curtains. The house was quiet. For once, it felt like mine again. No more frantic texts, no more late-night confessions or half-hearted apologies. Just stillness. I didn't go into work that day. Instead, I packed a small bag and drove across town to Madison's apartment. She lived in an old walk-up with a balcony that overlooked the tiny park we used to visit when things were still easy. I knocked softly, my heart thudding in my chest. Madison opened the door in an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled up in a messy bun. "Daniel," she said, surprise in her voice, but not hesitation. She stepped back to let me in. I dropped my bag by the door and let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I needed to see you," I said quietly. She nodded and closed the door behind me, and it felt like the world outside didn't matter for a while. We didn't talk about Claire or Marcus. We didn't talk about the court case or the family dinner. Instead, we talked about small things, the weather, the way the leaves were just starting to turn, the new bakery that had opened on the corner. Madison made us coffee, and we drank it on the balcony, wrapped in an old blanket as the chill of the morning settled around us. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted, my voice rough, "but I know I don't want to go back to who I was." She reached over and took my hand. "Then don't," she said simply. "We'll figure it out together." In the weeks that followed, we took it slow. We went on long walks with her dog in the evenings, stopping to watch the sunset behind the skyline. We made ramen on rainy nights, the steam from the pot fogging up the windows and making the world feel small and safe. We spent hours talking about everything, about nothing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I distanced myself from my mother's quiet manipulations, from the ghost of the life I thought I was supposed to want. I cut ties with Marcus and Claire for good. No calls, no explanations, no more waiting for apologies that would never come. My lawyer finalized the last bits of paperwork, and it was done. Clean. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects that challenged me and made me feel alive again. My boss noticed, even gave me a small promotion, but it wasn't about the title or the pay. It was about finally feeling like I wasn't just drifting through someone else's story. One night, after a long day at work, I came back to Madison's apartment with a bag of groceries and a cheap bottle of red wine. We cooked dinner together, the kind of easy, messy meal that didn't need to impress anyone. And after, we sat on her tiny balcony under the soft glow of the string lights she'd hung up herself. I looked at her, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the way she listened, really listened, when I talked. And I felt something settle inside me, something quiet and warm. "To no more secrets," I said, raising my glass. "To no more secrets," she echoed, clinking her glass against mine. I didn't know what the future would hold. I didn't know if there would be more heartbreak or more moments like this, small and perfect and real. But for the first time in a long time, I was okay with not knowing. As we sat there, the city stretched out around us. I realized that life wasn't supposed to be perfect. It wasn't supposed to be some carefully curated story you told the world. It was supposed to be real, messy, and beautiful and full of second chances. I reached over and took Madison's hand, the night air cool on my skin. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's dream. I felt like I was building something real, one quiet moment at a time.